Hey, good afternoon to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here live with the beard. Look at that, it's growing in pretty good. I was asking people on my private Facebook page, my personal one, what do they think about it? And they're like, yeah, keep it. So I think I'm going to keep it until March. It kept me warm during the winter storm. So it is December the 15th, 2018, and we're going to talk about the winter storm that I just covered and some of the things that I learned from that, and take a look then at as we switch over to the other side here, there's a computer on the other side of this iPhone that I'm streaming from, and we'll talk about the Southern Oscillation Index, and we haven't really looked at that in a while, how that affects or impacts the state of the ENSO or El Nino Southern Oscillation. We will look at sea surface temperature anomalies and some other things related to that, plus a tweet from Ben Knoll, who I like following him, from New Zealand, and some of the things that he is trying to go to the screensaver. Some of the things that I gotta set that screensaver to off. Some of the things that he's talking about for next year's sea surface temperatures, and an explanation as to what NMME is. Did you catch all that? NMME. What is that? We'll talk about that. Plus lower 48 weather and a look ahead at the week leading up to Christmas and what to expect in terms of travel, and a little shot at some things I'm thinking about for next year. And whatever. Some odds and ends, as I call it. All right, so real quick. Winter storm coverage this past weekend. A week ago today, I was on my way from Kitty Hawk to the interior of North Carolina, where I set up cameras. I have one in Kitty Hawk. The cameras, of course, are viewable from our patrons who support the effort at the $25 a month or higher level. They have access to HurricaneTrack.com Insider, and then, of course, it goes into our app, and they were used, of course, by the Weather Channel, my biggest client. Partner, really. Client makes it sound, I don't know, more informal. I really enjoy the work that I do with the Weather Channel, and I saw some of my stuff on the screen. It was nice to see your work on the big screen like that, knowing that millions of people perhaps are also seeing it. I was able to upload some quadcopter footage from Hickory, from Morganton, from Marion, and then Spruce Pine, where my parents used to live, so I knew that area really well. I knew how picturesque that it would be during a snowstorm, so I figured, what the heck? So I went up there. I thought I did pretty good being by myself. I put a camera right in the middle of the interstate. They've got these light poles, huge steel light poles on I-40, approaching, and on either side of Hickory, on the west and east sides of Hickory. And so I went out and just set the camera box right out on that light pole, right in the middle of the coming and going, the east and westbound lanes of I-40. Of course, I was very careful when doing so, but it was neat to just be able to immerse the audience right there in the middle. And another good thing too, Mike Cornelius, one of our supporters of many years, FloridaHurricane.com is his website, FL Hurricane, you might know him from there. Mike Cornelius helped to restream everything again on YouTube, which I need to learn how to do, and we're going to factor that into next year so we can make sure we can stream everything in the Android app and so forth and so on. So it just goes to show you all of this is about staying in the game, being relevant, covering an event like I love doing it, believe me, but like I promised that I would be able to do, and it was funded almost entirely because of the patrons that were charged, right, for their monthly subscription, like Netflix or whatever. And I got paid via PayPal on the 5th, and boom, the storm came up a few days later, and I had funding to do it without having to tax, so to speak, my family. It's a great thing to be able to have that freedom, so thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I think that, you know, we were pretty active, and hopefully you enjoyed the coverage. All right, so there'll be more to come. This was one of those winter storms where the cold air really wasn't that deep and frigid. It wasn't like it was in the lower 20s and just bitter cold air blasting in behind. As my good friend Jesse Bass said, it's more like it was sort of Canadian air rather than Arctic air. And I know you say, well, what's the difference? Well, there's a big difference because sometimes the air can come across off the Pacific Northwest, off the Pacific, way in the Northwest, off the Northwest Territories, and it's modified Canadian air. Yes, it's cold, but it doesn't have its source from the Arctic cross-polar flow, as we call it. And so this particular storm system was not particularly frigid, and I guess that's good, but still we had a lot of snow. Some folks still dealing with it. The interaction that I shared on Twitter with some people, very magical, if you will. I think that's amazing that we can do that, sort of share our experiences. And so anyway, it wasn't a very cold storm, and it didn't impact the Northeast. I think that the line got up to about just south of the DC suburbs across parts of Maryland, and that was about it. But indications are once we get into January, into February, like I say with the hurricane season, that's sort of your August and September analogs there, sort of the mirror images. August and September, big time for hurricanes, peak time. January, February is the peak time for these big coastal storms. We just have to have more cold air involved, and those two jet streams kind of joining together. The northern jet, which comes out of usually the Arctic when you get that kind of storm set up, and the southern stream, the subtropical jet, and when they intertwine, interesting things happen. And I think that's going to wait until after the new year, which is fine, because I want to continue to work on the documentary. That's that computer right there behind me. It's got the little chat box that I monitor, my own private chat that I can watch. That's where I edit the documentaries, right there. Just so you know, it's a nice Dell high-powered laptop, and I've been working on the documentary, and I want to keep working on it, so I'll try to get it done by March. All right, so anyway, winter storm was really interesting. So, you know, glad I got back all in one piece. Saw several accidents, people usually driving too fast for the conditions, you know, and I didn't have any problems. Everything worked fantastic, and in fact, one of our cameras that I set up in Kitty Hawk ran for the longest that they have ever run. This set a record. It was 80 hours plus or minus a few minutes, and I went and picked it up the other day, Monday, I guess, or Tuesday. I don't even know anymore. I went out there and picked it up, and I set it up Saturday morning early, Saturday morning, Sunday morning to Monday morning. So I picked it up Tuesday, and it had run for 80 hours, which is fantastic. And that's going to lead me to talk about something at the end for next year. All right, so let's switch over to the other camera, and hopefully you can still hear me. I know that the audio sounds different. I don't know why the iPhone switches microphones when you switch camera views. That makes no sense to me, but maybe I'll get up with Tim Cook someday, the CEO of Apple, and I can ask him, right? Haha. All right, so let me get my telestrator going here. Where are you, telestrator? There you are. I forgot to launch that. Yep, I better get a license for it for this new computer, because it expires tomorrow. All right. Hey, at least it didn't expire today, or I'd really be in a pickle. Okie doke. So, yep, off-season hurricane outlook and discussion time. And, you know, I know that this isn't as crisp and sharp as doing a screencast. I'll still do the screencast stuff, especially when there's something shorter to talk about, like a shorter time frame. And we will intermix the two. I'm not going to do everything live, but I didn't want to do everything just screencast. I like being able to talk to you and not just at you. So this isn't the best way to do it, but it works for me for now, and whatever. So yes, we will still do screencast from time to time, especially when things get busy and I want to put out something that's about 10 minutes long and we can just do a quick update. All right, enough about that. Let's get on with it. SOI, so the Southern Oscillation Index, I haven't looked at this really since the hurricane season. We knew that there was not going to be an El Nino coming on this past season. Once we got to about July, it became very obvious. And so I haven't really paid much attention. And just as a quick refresher for those of you that are saying, well, what is the SOI? Why is he talking about that? The Southern Oscillation Index, that's what it stands for. And generally speaking, when these numbers up here are positive, you're not in an El Nino pattern in terms of the atmosphere behaving as such, where you have lower pressure in the eastern Pacific for the net flow of air to move in that direction. That's not what this shows. When you have positive values, the lower pressures are usually in the western Pacific. And so your trade winds can be normal to above normal, etc. So in this case, with the SOI, it's looking like it's, positive there. Look at that daily contributor. This gets updated every day from the Bureau of Meteorology. 16.29 is today's reading. The 30-day is right around 0, so it's basically neutral. And then the 30-day is 4.29. And for those of you that like to see it graphically, there you go. I think I'm freaking it out. Hey, it disappeared. Wow, my web browser. It's a brand new computer. It shouldn't behave like that. But yeah, it's up. Okay, that's the bottom line here. What does that mean? Well, if we go look at the anomalies here, let's just get rid of that page. So the anomalies, the departures from normal, all right, so with the SOI being generally positive, overall there's lower pressure in the Western Pacific, so the net flow of air is going to be generally in this direction. This is an oversimplification, but that's what it generally tells me. It's a good litmus test, or literally a barometer, if you will. You know how people say, take what's the, a barometer of the situation. Let's measure the situation. Well, this is literally a measurement of that. And so it tells me that, yes, we do have this warming going on along the equator, but it's not that strong because we're not seeing negative values where the lower pressure would be on the eastern side of the Pacific and the net flow of air would be against the norm. And you would take all this warm water that's over here normally in the Western Pacific warm pool and help shift it eastward. You also just generally pile up the water better in the East Pacific. There's a lot of mechanisms involved, but the simplest way to look at it, positive SOI is not a positive thing to grow an El Nino. It's not the cure-all answer to everything, but for me, it is a great base measurement to look at. And when it's consistently positive, yeah, that means something, just as if it is consistently negative. So we'll visit that a couple of times a month, perhaps, between now and the start of the hurricane season in 2019, and we'll see what's going on. So that all being said, yep, it's a little warmer than average across the equatorial Pacific, almost to weak El Nino thresholds. Luckily for the global everything, it's not going to be a very strong El Nino, it does appear. So that's good, because it is like a big old thermostat down here when it does get cranking. Notice in the Atlantic, this large area extending from the North Atlantic south of Greenland all the way into the deep tropics, the cold horseshoe shape there relative to average, these are anomalies, departures from the average or the normal, and here in the Atlantic, this sort of horseshoe shape of cool relative to normal indicates, generally speaking, the cold phase of the AMO, or the Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillation. Another way to put it, if this was the heart of hurricane season, which it's not, it's December, that would be a very negative look for creating Atlantic hurricanes, but it's December, so it doesn't matter right now. That brings me to this next thing. This is from Ben Knoll, and I want to show you this. This is his tweet, updated NMME. First of all, what does that mean? I promised you I would learn it, and so I was going to show you. Here it is. What is the NMME? It's the North American Multi-Model Ensemble. And what is that? Well, it's a collaboration between several climate modeling centers. And basically what it means is, like when we look at ensembles of models instead of just one run, and I use the analogy of an ensemble group or an orchestra when you're talking about music versus just a soloist, whether it be a trumpet or a string instrument or somebody choral singing, right? When you put everybody together, you have a generally better sound. Sometimes, though, you have a great solo, like a trumpet solo or a vocal solo. Sometimes the deterministic runs, the GFS, the Euro, or a particular ocean model will stand out. but it's better when everything is looked at as a whole and you get this ensemble package, okay? And that's very important here, and that's what this means, the North American Multi-Model Ensemble. North American Multi-Model Ensemble, NMME. That's what that means. So going back to this, all right, let's play through. I'll stop it again. Ben Knoll tweeting that it highlights the continuation of El Nino. All right, so here we are, January through February. There's the El Nino down in the deep tropics. But notice what's happening as well here in the Atlantic. This starts to warm. All right, so I'm going to get rid of this and we'll play it. Watch how that warms up there in the Atlantic as we get to June, July. The El Nino kind of holding on, but not very strong. More important, I think, if we're looking at clues for next year's hurricane season, is that the overall multi-model ensemble, which takes into account several models, not just one, that's why this is important. And he's got those little eyeballs there, does Ben. See, right there? Yeah, indicating a warmer than average Atlantic Ocean for next year's hurricane season. So let's get rid of all of this. And that's December, January to February next year, March, April, May, June, July, August, September. We'll pause it. Yeah, a little bit of an El Nino hanging on in the Pacific, which I tend to doubt. That it just seems that there's always supposed to be one, and usually there isn't, at least these last few years. But this is an interesting look compared to where we are now. So just something to watch. This will get updated often, and we'll check in with Ben. And as we get into the new year, I will definitely invite him to come on via Skype, and we'll talk about some of these things in person. Well, as in person as you can be over Skype. All right, so leaving the tropics, nice quiet lower 48 map. That's good. Just a few flood watches, etc., up along parts of Maryland into southeast Ohio, maybe northwest West Virginia. But for, you know, the week leading up to the big travel period close to Christmas, this is a good map to see. No giant disruptive storm systems for the time being. Most of the precip up here. Finally broke 100 inches, by the way, down here in the Wilmington area. Officially at the airport, 100 plus inches of rain for the year. 20 to 25 of that, I think, came from Florence, something like that, which is insane in and of itself. But you can see, generally, across the U.S., you know, the radar is nice and quiet. So a good travel period, not much Arctic air at all across the country. So a little bit of a moderation before I think we have to pay the piper in January and February. So a real quick look at the GFS. I want to compare a couple of things. This is from the 12Z run today. This is the storm system this morning. It moves on out. Yeah, pretty good little low pressure up there. You know, it's just not enough cold air. So southeast New England's going to be mostly a cold rain. More interesting weather trying to come into the Pacific Northwest where you need the snowpack and the rainfall, but nothing on a big time scale that, you know, drops in and then bowls across the country, literally like a bowling ball. These storm systems are kind of going up and over that big ridge of high pressure, anchored out over the Great Basin out west. So really, the next storm system here comes in through about Thursday when a system tries to come up out of the Gulf. If I can get my, come on, why aren't we working? Give me my pointer. It's just frozen. That's fine. It can just be frozen. We don't want to exit that. I don't know why it's frozen. Maybe I should refresh the page. Oh, there it goes. I just had to yell at it. Next storm system comes through. But you see, going through the next 2 weeks, really no major issues across the lower 48. No gigantic storms. This is what it looks like at the 500 millibar level. I just kind of wanted to show you this. That's the upper level low that's been causing all the rain, surface low as well associated with it, but no Arctic air, and so that's keeping things generally suppressed. You see that? The upper levels of the atmosphere are kind of wavy, but no deep longitudinal troughs like that. Nothing like that until maybe towards here as we get the first day officially of winter, December 21st. This starts to dig in pretty deep. Yeah, that's interesting there, but that's still a ways away. About 132 hours out, ridging out west, so mild to warm in the desert southwest, cold in some of these areas, but not frigid. and maybe some storminess coming on the east side of that trough. We'll just have to wait and see. But the big time signal for massive outbreaks of cold air and storminess, just not there yet. Once we get into January, February, as I alluded to, possibly then. Real quick, just wanted to show you this with all the rain that we have had. Ed Piotrowski down at WPDE tweeting a lot about the rivers, which is great. I like that kind of interaction on social media to keep people aware, especially after what these folks have gone through. With all the rain we've had, minor flooding on the Waccamaw, minor to moderate on the Little Petey River near Gallivant's Ferry, and the Lumber River at Lumberton. Boy, these folks have really had it hard. Matthew in 2016 and then Florence this year, and they really, really have had a rough one. And this'll, they're still in moderate right now, and the river will rise a little bit, but not into major, it does appear. And then the Petey River at Petey, also going into moderate. Just wanted to update you on the rainfall and what it has done. All right, real quick before I turn the camera back on me, Christmas idea. If you want a DVD from last year, 2017, I'm still working on the one for 2018. That'll be ready February or March. But people have asked about this via email, etc. And once I make this YouTube video public and thousands of people get to watch it, hey, there you go, Christmas idea. Where do you get it? You go to hurricanetrack.com/dvd.html. Really easy. And that covers Harvey, Irma, Maria, Nate. No, I wasn't in Puerto Rico, Maria, but I still covered it. And you'll see. Get the DVD and you'll see. It's actually the best work to date. However, I'm pretty sure once I finish 2018's edition that it'll be the best work to date. I'm always going to try to top myself. So there you go. Christmas idea. Whoops, I bumped the tripod. hurricanetrack.com/dvd.html if you want a copy of last year's DVD. All right, so one of the things I want to talk about for next year real quick, this is part of the updating part. Again, the support that I've got from Patreon and our Hurricane Track insiders, as well as some other private investors, my relationship with the Weather Channel, etc., allows me to sort of look ahead and plan for the future, obviously. We don't know everything. We don't know how the economy is going to shake out. Weird geopolitical things could come up and wreck everything. You just never know. But the outlook does look good in terms of what I'm doing and what my team and I are doing and what we want to do from here. And one of those things is to expand the coverage of the live cameras and the data starting in 2019. So after talking to several of my colleagues and sort of brainstorming about this idea, I'm going to begin moving forward as the budget allows as we get into next year. And what this means is I essentially want to have at least a half a dozen live camera systems along the coast during a landfalling, especially hurricane, and tropical storms too, of course. We go out and set up equipment for those as well. I'm not just a hurricane centric, right? So, you know, we were out there for Gordon, and again, these offer opportunities for testing and awareness and so forth. But anyhow, hurricanes especially, and especially major hurricanes, you think about Michael and major impact storms like Florence, at least a half a dozen systems along the coast set up like a fence, if you will, and then inland along the path. We have never done this, but I think it's time, especially since we will have the financial support, the technology, and the crew to handle this, and a game plan as well. That's important too. You can have the best crew in the world, but if you don't have a game plan, it's not going to work. And so we've really been talking about this, and you know, that's what I do in the off season. You know, we talk on the phone, we talk via text, we share ideas. Sometimes we get together at conferences when we can, and it's amazing some of the things we come up with. And so that idea is to think about the forecast, and it shows a tropical cyclone, hurricane, going inland, like Michael did. Florence is an anomaly because it sort of sat and went weird, and as did Harvey. But, you know, think about Irma, you think about Ivan, again, Michael, where they're going to come inland into the southeast or maybe even the central Gulf Coast, etc. I would like to have camera systems inland 50, 100, 300 miles, whatever the budget and technology acquiring allows, and then whatever we can come up with in terms of a time frame. And here's where the Kitty Hawk camera for this past winter storm comes into play, kind of bringing it all home for you. 80-hour runtime, reliably, and they didn't skip a beat. We know we can do that. 80 hours, that's more than 3 days. Imagine what we can do. Placing cameras inland from a hurricane's initial landfall point and adding to them eventually pressure sensors at least. And in some cases where we can set up, we will add anemometers as well, where we can put something on an overpass. Now that we've got this new bridge device that we're going to be using, I'm telling you, it is an absolute amazing time to do what we're doing. I might be the leader of it, so to speak, the bearded face of it, but man, that's what we have done together and what we're going to do, whether there's one hurricane landfall next year or 3 or 5 or 0. They're coming back eventually, we know that. And I think this new game plan is going to be exceptional for providing coverage in the form of video data, video information, the whole package, all the way from where they make landfall to perhaps several hundred miles inland, and however best we can do that. So I'm excited about it from the perspective of how much of an impact that could have on awareness for people, knowing what's happening inland, etc., and really helping the value of what we're doing as well. Think about folks that use the app, iPhone and Android version, our subscribers, our patrons, adding to the value at the same time serving the public even more. Local emergency management, we never charge a dime for emergency managers or first responders to access our information. We always give that away for free, and we try to make sure they have access to that freely. In other words, easily. And you guys help to make that happen. So more on that as we move forward into next year. And so just think about it. This past winter storm, I purposely went to the well, of course I did, because there was going to be impacts there. But I wanted to set something up in Kitty Hawk, which is on the coast, and then all the way inland as far west as, what was the westernmost camera I had? Let me think. Marion, right. It's been a long week, folks. I don't know what that is off the top of my head, but it's more than 300 miles, I would think, right? And that's pretty good. And I was able to do that by myself. Pat me on the back. So if I can do that by myself, imagine what I could do with a crew, and we have a big time game plan. I'm so excited about it. And I think it's really going to make a difference. So here we go. All right, well, let me get the end screen over here. I forgot, because I got to sign off and flip it back to that. I'll get used to this over time. Do you like this? I hope you do. I think talking to you, because I know there's about 8 people watching live right now, and it's not the numbers that are watching live, it's eventually how many people will watch it down the road once it's archived, and that number that's live will go up, absolutely. But I like being able to talk to you and not just at you. That being said, I think I'm done for now. So thanks for your support. Thanks for tuning in. I'll have an update on Monday. I know it's just a couple of days from now. I'm going to be traveling next week, but Monday I'll have an update. We'll take a look at the week ahead. It'll be a screencast update, so a lot shorter, and the graphics and everything that you're used to. So that'll be on Monday, the typical weekly hurricane off-season outlook and discussion, or whatever the heck it's called. Have a great rest of your weekend. Thanks as always for tuning in. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. Thanks for watching. I'll be back again with you with another video on Monday. Well, let's try again. There we go.